It may be hard to imagine that anybody regards an affectless state, that is a condition of no feeling, as some kind of ideal. I mean, surely it's nobody's ambition, finally, to lose his capacity to feel anything. I mean, who wants to end up in the realm of an unfeeling void? Who wants to be like the unfeeling android Data from Star Trek, or the unfeeling Vulcan Spock, or worse than that, Darth Vader from Star Wars, the unfeeling Jedi Knight Warrior? I mean, or who wants to be so disconnected from feeling that he presents with the flat effect of a zoned out pothead? Well, nobody, I hope. And yet, as I look around, sometimes it seems perhaps more than a few are moving steadily towards just an affectless condition. And some, sad to say, appear already to be firmly planted in that unfeeling void. Whether it's people in line at a supermarket, I mean, you can look almost anywhere, sitting in a doctor's office, sometimes I've noticed like a certain dronish look on the face. It's perhaps the look of like the sofa spud who has ventured forth to show up somewhere to then stare blankly into space, showing little or no affect. Now, sometimes this very state of no affect receives a higher rating than what I've been giving it. This is when a state of unfeeling detachment is spiritualized and is regarded as some kind of an attainment. I mean, some aspirant from this point of view has attained an affectless void of cosmic consciousness. Well, I'm not impressed with either the sofa spud or the New Ager. For what I've observed in both doesn't seem like anything that's been achieved, but rather a failure to engage, kind of tuned out, not tuned in. What I see is a kind of washed out look on the face, a disengaged look, indicating a collapse of some kind. I notice a spacey, dopey look, and like the nose ring doesn't help. Your state of no affect, in other words, has no inspiring effect, but serves only to depress. And even more than that, the effect of no affect can be absolutely paralyzing, like energy zapping. For example, I once met someone who claimed that he'd always lived in some kind of untroubled, unaffected state. He called it being a believer. His state of belief, he explained, had come to him naturally, without any kind of struggle. So there before me was, behold, a man in a state of no affect, but trying to gussy it up. Well, it didn't work, for as he spoke, there was no feeling, there was no presence at all. And I felt myself sinking in response as he sucked the energy out of me. In effect, his condition of no affect clobbered me. It felt like a full-out assault, a major attack. It was hard to fend off the punches. His state of no affect was passively aggressive. In fact, his success at attaining this condition of no affect was effectively violent. There was something inhuman about it. And you know what? It was sort of scary too. It felt abusive. And maybe this is abuse of the worst kind. Like you wallop other people by your state of no affect. You probably should be locked up soon, for it's the surest way to kill any relationship. Like, for instance, if you're a married guy and you practice no affect, you're going to effectively drive your latest wife into the madhouse or take her down to your level. You then will have both teamed up to practice no affect, a prospect the world could do without. Now, you may have noticed a couple or two who have made this kind of pact with each other. And what happens is then they practice being absent while present. We say about people like this, they're there but not there. I once, by the way, noticed a group of Roman Catholic sisters who were practicing no affect. They were sitting around watching a game show at their convent television. And I'm still recovering from the sight. Well, it was said by the great Australian art critic Robert Hughes that Andy Warhol actually set out to become an affectless hero. Imagine, he set out to become the affectless hero of the affectless cultural movement of the mid-1960s. I expect you'll have heard of Andy Warhol, the guy who paints soup cans, knows all the movie stars, and praised banality. Well, Warhol amazingly, again, thought that the affectless condition was worth going after. And thus, says Hughes, the critic, the time, like in the 60s, favored a walking void, and that's what it got in Andy Warhol. Television at the time was beginning to produce an affectless culture, and Andy Warhol, the walking void, led the way in spreading the contagion far and wide. Indeed, says Robert Hughes, again, Andy Warhol seemed to have some kind of aspiration of no affect. Well, Hugh describes how up until the 1960s, there'd been a general understanding in the culture that you make a difference. It's important to make a difference between higher art and lower art, or proper art, improper art. The distinction was fairly clear to most people. Warhol's effect was to wear that distinction down because he communicated that it didn't matter to discriminate. Art, said Warhol, is anything that you can get away with. Those, therefore, says Hughes, who had unfulfilled desires and undesirable ambitions and who felt guilty about it, gravitated to Andy Warhol. And what did Andy give them then? He offered them absolution in this way. He offered the absolution that came in the form of the gaze of the blank mirror that refuses all judgment. For Andy Warhol was a Chauncey Gardner, like the hero of Jerry Kosinski's Being There. And so he was credited like Chauncey with wisdom, this great wisdom, though he had no wisdom at all. Like Obama-like, he was but a blank slate upon whom people projected their hopes of what they would like to see when all the time nothing was there. Even Andy himself agreed with this assessment of him. He thought he was a nothing, and strangely, he was without shame, proud of it. In an interview in the 60s, he said, "If you want to know all about Andy Warhol, just look at the surface of my paintings and films and me, and there I am. There's nothing behind it." Ugh. Well, Warhol and company are exemplars of this unaffected condition. I would call it a robotic condition. There's an absence of real feeling. In such people, there's no aspiration or very little aspiration for truth, for beauty, or for goodness. No, any yearning for the highest has been effectively suppressed or is being held down or buried. The state of no affect then has taken over. And as British writer Colin Wilson says, when the robot's in charge, when you're on automatic pilot, living in this state of no affect, our capacity to feel is restricted. Like we've lost touch. Deep feeling is being suppressed. The robot's in charge. Our capacity for deep feeling atrophies just as muscles that aren't exercised become flabby. And so, as Wilson puts it, in this state, nothing even seems worth doing. Life becomes flat and pointless because you're out of touch with something essential. Now, in contrast to the no affect effect of Andy Warhol and company, there's the inspiring effect of Swami Shantananda, a former university professor who became a Siddha Yoga monk. Shantananda experienced a revelation that he regards as the turning point in his life. It was a glimpse, he said, at the deepest level of his being, a glimpse of my own being, to use his words. An enlightened meditation teacher had given him a mantra to repeat. And here's his experience. I'm simply going to share it with you. Sitting on a cushion, repeating Om Namah Shivaya silently in my mind, I noticed the letters of the mantra begin to dissolve. I could perceive the words as pure energy, as a vibrant and intelligent power. This mantric power, which had a presence, also had an intention. And I could feel it move to the base of my spine and proceed gently up the spine until it reached the top of my head. There it seemed that the power of the mantra opened itself out like the petals of a blossoming lotus, and then slowly began to close again, wrapping itself tenderly around my mind. I had the very clear impression that this energy formed a grip on my mind and then quite literally put it to the side. Although I didn't open my eyes, it seemed as if I could see my mental activity neatly bundled beside me on the meditation cushion. Well, it's a relief that that's there. My mental activity neatly bundled beside me on the meditation cushion. At that point, he says, I became totally serene. It was almost as if I'd entered an inner space, a space that contained no images, no emotions, no mental conversations, no thoughts at all. But it's not the no affect state. He mentioned no emotions, but what he means is that he's gotten to what might be called a feeling that is deeper than feeling, a feeling deeper than emotions. So this was not the no affect state. It wasn't an empty space. It was not empty at all. As Shantananda puts it, it was filled with something. But what was it? All I was aware of at the time was a pervasive sense of sweetness. And that's pretty good. A pervasive sense of sweetness. Again, feeling beyond feeling. Shantananda's experience was to be effectively raised beyond any state of no affect into another state entirely, a state of inner fullness, which has often been called the state of the purified heart. There was no absence of feeling. Again, this is not the no affect state. Rather, this was feeling to the full. This was purified feeling. A very good place to be.